Well, good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, if you are just visiting with us today, I'm Pastor Sean Bunger. I'm one of the pastors here at Gateway Trinity Lutheran Church, and we welcome you to this afternoon's concert. Hopefully most of you made it inside before it started to pour too much, but we are glad that you're with us. We hope you enjoy this wonderful afternoon of handbell music. For those of you who are new to it, it'll be a great experience for you. We appreciate you coming. It is a free concert, but we are collecting a free will donation offering for those who want to help out the ministry. You can do that. There's baskets at the exit of the sanctuary as you exit the concert today. If you'd like to leave a donation, we'd appreciate that. But we hope that you'll enjoy the show and enjoy it. And as Terry said, afterwards, come up and ask questions, more questions, check out the bells and all those things. But for now, just sit back, relax, and enjoy as we welcome Ring Sarasota.
you all very much, and welcome both to the folks who are here in person and to our internet audience. We want to really thank Gateway Lutheran for being our host this afternoon, and we really would like to say a special thanks to the Gateway Ringers and friends who hosted us and fed us last night. We liked it. It was yummy. I think that we can all agree that life the last 12 months has been anything but normal. Now it's about 13 months, I think. So I have a question. How many of you have had to cancel travel plans in the last year? Just about everybody, right. And many of us have really missed the fun of a road trip, the chance to see new things, to experience special foods, and just enjoy a change of pace. Well, this afternoon, we're going to take you on a musical road trip on the highways and byways of our wonderful country. As we travel, different members of our ensemble will share their memories and personal stories related to each location. So sit back, get comfortable, buckle your virtual seatbelt so we're safe, and we're off. Having moved from Atlanta to New Jersey in 1983, I can relate to the homesickness that Hoagie Carmichael was feeling when he wrote our next song. He was sitting in an apartment in New York City in March of 1930, looking out at the bleak end of winter. For the most part, I enjoyed living in New Jersey, except for when the calendar turned to the month of March. Growing up in the South, I was always counted on those several days, even in February, of spring-like weather, and full-on spring flowers and warmth by March. Driving to work in New Jersey during March meant seeing piles of dirty snow along the roadside instead of the forsythia and the daffodils. So I was very happy when, after 3 years of those dreary northern marches, I was able to follow that moving truck on the road that took me back to sweet, sweet Georgia.
Years ago, while living in Pennsylvania, I fell in love with the excitement and wonder of kayaking. So I ordered a kayak online, the size of which would fit into my compact Crosstrek Subaru. Great was the joy when that kayak was delivered to my mountaintop home in Pennsylvania. To celebrate, I took my first trip on the dining room floor, complete with 2 dogs and a glass of champagne. It was great. Obviously, I didn't get very far that day, but on following days, I was able to initiate my purchase without dogs and bubbly, visiting lakes and rivers in the area. One of the factors in our decision to move to Florida 4 years ago was that I would be able to kayak all year long. Winters in Pennsylvania are not very conducive to kayaking unless you attach a ski under your kayak to ski on the snow. However, I forgot that there is one important aspect of kayaking on rivers in Florida. Florida rivers have these floating logs that can bite and can remove a limb or two if they so choose. Still, Florida kayaking with an occasional alligator thrown in to add excitement beats snow kayaking any day. A river that I have yet to kayak is the Great Mississippi River. Visiting Memphis, Tennessee, I can remember standing by the riverside thinking how much fun it would be to be out on that river trying to keep pace with the old-fashioned steam paddle boats as they steamed by. Rivers can be many things to different people. For me, kayaking, for another, maybe fishing, but sometimes just sitting on a riverbank, watching the lazy river flow by, can help you forget all of your troubles, even if only for a short while.
next leg of our journey, we're heading east to Tennessee, the home of country music, country and western, and a southern way of life. Anything country and western people do well is tell stories. So this is a story that was created on a bus on a way to a gig, and they came up with this lyrics of this sad, sad story, because all country music songs are sad, sad stories. No dog in this one, though, I apologize. And this one, the boy loses the girl. So they, inspired by these lyrics, they wrote them on a matchbox. So I'm guessing there aren't very many verses, because it's not very big. But this tale is about a young couple who went to a dance at a local ballroom. They're dressed in their finest, pale yellow dress with, of course, the big white corsage, and he and his best Sunday go to meeting clothes. And the way you hear it, there's a wood floor, gaily decorated walls, and twinkling white lights. The band set up in the corner. It's a lovely scene. Band begins to play, step into the shoes of the heroine, dancing with the handsome gentleman, when an old friend is spotted on the corner. Introduce the friend to the loved one. And while they were dancing, my friend stole my sweetheart from me. Sigh. So in this way, you can feel the heartbreak, and you hear the lyrics. I remember the night and that beautiful dance. Now I know just how much I have lost. Yes, I lost my little darling the night they were playing the beautiful Tennessee Waltz. And we're reminded that when a loved one becomes a memory, the memory becomes a treasure, the Tennessee Waltz.
So it is June of 2006, Washington, D.C.
I'm on tour with my church's high school handbell choir, and it's my first year as their director. What you're about to hear is a true story. In fact, 2 of the ringers you see before you today can vouch for me because they were actually on that trip. Paige was one of the choir members. She's that cutie on the left. And her mom, Valerie, was a super chaperone. You know that a super chaperone is somebody who can carry everyone's junk and also serve as a substitute ringer. She was super. So as a first-time director, naturally I overthought every detail, from the scheduled performances at the area churches, at Union Station, and especially obsessing over our performance on the Millennium Stage at the Kennedy Center. Making sure that I incorporated education into the tour with the high school kids, I scheduled a lesson from the Tower Bell Ringers at Washington National Cathedral. I arranged for them to lay a wreath at Arlington National Cemetery, and we did a tour of the monuments from an open-air trolley. So here we are on this open-air trolley with 13 very talented but very typical teenagers. So we make a few stops, we took a few pictures, and then the skies began to darken and the thunder rumbled. Yeah, it's giving me the creeps a little bit. So our monuments tour abruptly ended, and the objective became getting back to the hotel safely. Between the driving rain and the wind, the cars that were stuck flooded in the street, and remember, we're in an open-air trolley, and the manholes spouting like fountains, we were all kind of freaked out. After what seemed like hours, we ended up back at a barbecue place, soaking wet but safe. So since the storm shut the metro down, our audiences for the remainder of the tour were smaller than we had hoped. But none of us will ever forget that dramatic day in our nation's capital.
everybody. I'm Carolyn. I grew up about 30 miles due west of New York City, about the same place as those pictures from the dirty snow. Yeah, there. Every year while I was in elementary and middle school, we got to make a class trip to the city, which was at that time not yet called the Big Apple. Each year we visited a different important New York City site. One year it was the Museum of Natural History with that life-size T-Rex skeleton staring down at us at the main entrance, ready to eat any unsuspecting or errant children. Hey, we thought so. In third grade, it was the Bronx Zoo, where we saw real polar bears, not white but beige, and anteaters, my best friend's favorite animal at the time. We saw concerts at Alice Tully Hall more than once, both before and after those sound-reflecting cloud panels were installed next to the ceiling. It did make a huge difference in the acoustics of the hall. My favorite years were when we got to see a Broadway play. I think that's when I really began to love stage music. The show I remember best is Fiddler on the Roof. Of course, the understudies were on stage for those weekday matinees attended by lots and lots of school children. And even though I didn't get to see the great Zero Mostel as Tevye, it was a great thrill to see the stage, the costuming, the lighting, the actors, and hear all those wonderful songs. So imagine yourself in one of those classic Broadway theaters and enjoy this piece that highlights some of the best songs from the stage, Broadway.
So I hope you've all enjoyed your visit to Broadway. Wrapping up our visit to New York City, we've concluded the first leg of our tour. Now our trip takes us out to the Midwest, several sightseeing stops along the way. If you've missed being out on Sarasota Bay or the Gulf waters, you'll have the opportunity to enjoy boating recreation as we now share with you our visit to Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes. As a boy, I often visited my grandparents and cousins in Minnesota. My grandpa would take us out on his boat on various lakes around Pelican Rapids. He could drive in any direction from his farm, and we'd find ourselves at a different lake. Grandpa would only take us out in the clear weather and always made sure that everyone wore a life jacket. I remember both the fun of catching sunfish and the relaxing calm out in the lake in the early evening. We'd gently drift in our boat while resident loons glided on the lake. We'd hear the eerie, haunting calls and almost spiritual communion with nature. There's one now. Compared to my relaxing childhood experiences on the lakes of Minnesota, today's lake adventure includes a bit more excitement. Our next piece, By the Lakeside, was written by Cape Coral composer Michael Hellman and musically represents the story of Luke chapter 8, verses 22 through 25. One day, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side of the lake." So they got into a boat and set out. As they sailed, he fell asleep. A squall came down on the lake so that the boat was being swamped, and they were in great danger. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Master, Master, we're going to drown." He got up and rebuked the wind and the raging waters. The storm subsided, and all was calm. "Where is your faith?" he asked his disciples. In fear and amazement, they asked one another, "Who is this? He commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him." By the Lakeside.
music can touch our soul. Susie and I have shared many times that when we play that piece and we get through the chaotic part into that calm, we just well up. How can you not? Why do songs trigger such emotion in us? I want to try something different. I want you to settle in, relax, maybe close your eyes, and lean into this piece for a minute. Did this tug on a heartstring? I'd like to share with you what others said. Miranda said, "This hymn takes me back to the day my son had his U.S. Navy pass in review. The recruit choir sang this, and there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd." Amber Miller said, "My aunt used to sing this when we went camping. She's been gone 4 years, but I can still hear her singing it." Margaret Scott says, "I have loved this song since we were taught to sing in 3rd grade, 57 years ago. It still reaches deep into my soul." Kane Pierce reminds me of loved ones and friends who have passed over the years.
Well, we had a long trip so far, and our conductor, Rick, felt like he needed some R&R, so he passed the baton to our brand new associate director, Terry Chapman. You might know her. So, like, there we were on a long road trip out there to the left coast, to California, in our VW microbus. California, the home of the gold rush and the 49ers. We didn't think we'd make it over the mountains, but we did. Then there were the deserts, hot and dry, that went on for miles and miles. So way hot and dry, they called the big one Death Valley. Then there were these crazy tall pine trees, sequoias, hundreds of feet tall. Ended up in LA, Los Angeles, the city of angels. This is the home to Hollywood, swimming pool, movie stars. Dropped by that Universal Studios where they make some of those movies and TV shows, sound stages and street sets and all. They even let Frankenstein's monster roam the streets scaring little kids. When a huge monster came up and put his hand on my little shoulder, let me tell you, that was a memorable event. So, we got to the Pacific coast. Cliffs and beaches. The Pacific, so big and blue and cold. Mountains of driftwood at the high tide line. This is not the Gulf Coast. The sound, the roar, the huge waves. So, a little Beach Boys music is in order. Surf City, USA, gigantic rollers coming in. Surfers all trying to catch a monster wave. Just super gnarly, dude.
The year is 1982. I arrive in Houston, Texas, after a long, cold, dark, and windy winter in Chicago. The first thing I do is buy a long, ruffly skirt and a leather belt with a buckle highlighted by an oil drilling rig on the buckle. Texas two-step, anyone? Determined to make this uncivilized southern city my home, I began to explore the area surrounding Houston. Did you know that area was settled in the late 1800s by Germans who were hoodwinked into traveling to this would-be paradise? Well, some of the best German sausage I've ever tasted came from the small towns between Houston and Austin. While the Alamo may be a little underwhelming the first time you lay eyes on it, it's overwhelming to realize that a small army of men defended it for 13 days. Of course, they all died. It's worth a trip to Texas in the spring just for the breathtaking sight of the fields of bluebonnets in bloom. And there is no barbecue like Texas barbecue. My life took a 180-degree turn with my move to Texas. I met my husband the first weekend in town. Then, transitioning out of the oil industry in the mid-'80s, I purchased a retail craft store. Not the best business venture, but there I met the world's nicest people, many of whom are still among my closest friends. The week after my 44th birthday, I gave birth to a son who seemed to be the reward for the adventure of my life. I came to Houston alone, and when I left, this uncivilized city had become home and had given me a family and some of my best friends. As life took the Hayes family to another country and then another state, I still look back to those 9 years as something very special. And yes, a part of me lies deep in the heart of Texas.
Hello, my name is Katie and I like jazz. Considered to be America's classical music, I cannot get enough of those blue notes mixing traditional lines with just the right amount of improvisational rebellion. It is quite literally music to my ears. I joined the band in middle school wanting to play trumpet, but that section quickly grew crowded. So I turned to my teacher and I asked, "What do you need?" And that's how I learned to play the bass clarinet. I know, it's not too jazzy, but stick with me. Our school had a jazz ensemble, and seeing no bass clarinets among the crew, I went back to my director, and this time I asked, how can I be part of that? So that summer, I started taking tenor saxophone lessons and spent the rest of my middle and high school career riffing up and down the scales, mostly in tune with the rest of my jazz-minded friends. I got something else out of this experience that I had not expected. In addition to the camaraderie of my peers and the joy of playing and performing, this foray into jazz music also brought me closer to a special person. His name was Charlie, but I knew him as Pop-Pop. My grandfather and my father, like him, played the drums. Once Pop-Pop learned of this new aspect of my life, we immediately had a new bond, that of jazz musician. There's a memorable photo I keep of him as a young man sitting behind his kit, grinning ear to ear with drumsticks at the ready, looking like he's having the time of his life. That is how music should be played, enjoyed by both instrumentalist and musician alike. Our next piece is a familiar one, so I'm certain you'll enjoy it as much as we do playing it. It's not swing or big band, but an American standard, and I know Pop-Pop would have loved it. The lyrics capture how music can transcend generations. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
There's no place like home. And so, at the end of our journey around the country, we return here to our beloved Southwest Florida. I was born in Sarasota Memorial Hospital before I had air conditioning. And I was born of native Floridian parents, so I don't do the cold. And so I'm really happy to return here to sunny, warm Florida. Sunny, warm, wet Florida. I've got a couple of years on me, so I've seen a lot of changes in this area. Yeah, I remember when Thomas and Henry and I used to pal around together there over on the waterfront. Well, no, I'm not really old enough to have hung out with Mr. Edison or Mr. Ford, but I have seen a lot of changes in the area. It's sometimes hard to fathom just how much has changed just in my lifetime. I remember growing up, we lived in the middle of nowhere, right next to Siesta Key. If you've been there lately, I don't need to say any more. I remember when the Tamiami Trail was really and truly the only way to get from Tampa to Miami, and there were all kinds of cool things on it. And I remember when Sanibel was just this sleepy little quiet place. If you've been there lately, I also remember hearing about how much better than our beaches Daytona Beach was. I realized it was marketing once I actually saw Daytona Beach for the first time. But growing up here, I assumed that the whole world was like Southwest Florida. As we all know, I was very wrong. However, like many teenagers, I couldn't wait to get away, so I had to go live a lot of other places before I realized it was so much better right here. You all know the natural beauty, the wealth of culture, the amazing intellectual resources that make this place so wonderful. I could go on, but I really don't need to, do I? Our homecoming piece today, Beneath the Sparkling Skies, was commissioned by Ring Sarasota for our 10th anniversary. We had planned to perform it last season, our 10th, but as we all know, 2020 was just not a stellar year for performances. This piece is a challenge piece. It incorporates 10 key changes, yes, 10, got a theme here, requires an enormous amount of time and coordination, and involves virtually every bell we own, except one. As a result, like its inspiration, which would be our city of Sarasota, real estate up here becomes really valuable. As you listen to this piece, think of how your city shines. Whether enjoying the sparkling waves on the spectacular beaches, enjoying a sparkling performance at the Barbara B. Mann Auditorium, driving over the sparkling intercoastal on the Sanibel Bridge, or even watching the sparkling eyes of alligators while kayaking on the Caloosahatchee River. We all benefit from the rich, sparkling resources of our wonderful home. This is Beneath the Sparkling Skies.
We're so happy that you joined us on our road trip this afternoon, whether you're here in person or through the wonders of technology. We hope you enjoyed the musical journey around this exciting country of ours. Maybe you had a chuckle or two. Maybe you shed a tear. We hope we inspired you to start planning your own post-pandemic road trip. We'd like to close our time with you today with one of our favorites, a familiar song that speaks to the beauty of our nation.